Good morning, everyone. My name is Rory Robertson. My question is for Dr. Pran. I've done a lot of, investigating of how these things fit together, how these, the Australian Diabetes Strategy, Australian National Diabetes Strategy 2016 to 2020, they wrote a sort of a 20 or 30, 40-page document where the Australian Diabetes Strategy did not mention the word carbohydrate once, which sort of seems a bit bizarre. And when you track down the main scientific author of that document, a fellow called Dr. Stephen Colagieri, it turns out he has a side business writing low GI diet books that say things like there is absolute consensus that sugar in food does not cause diabetes, and separately he's a medical doctor and he's on all these various pharmaceutical boards, and I think he was picking up, it's documented, newspaper reported, like there's spreadsheets of this stuff of conflicts of interest of medical doctors. I don't know, tens and twenties of thousands of dollars per 6 months for being on these boards and for doing stuff for farmers. So my question is, are these people corrupt, or are they just useful idiots for the pharmaceutical groups?
Look, as I said in my talk, the game theory and the tragedy of commons is when you maximise profit, you will have to endanger public good. There is zero doubt about that, and that probably happens at a human level. Whether if we could step outside our egocentric perspective of the world and look at it from what would we do in their situation is difficult to know. But I don't think they're idiots. I think there's certainly significant amounts of corruption. I think there was a systematic review actually published a few weeks ago speaking to the conflicts of interest in the American dietary guidelines, and I think it's something it's like there's 90% of the individuals that help write the guidelines have some form of conflict of interest with industry. So we've got a worrying situation where the public has fundamentally become apathetic to what's going on. I think most of us here are aware, but I think we need pushback from the public to be able to counteract this, because it's certainly not going to happen at a government or a policy level. Far too complex. I think this is why I'm passionate about educating people, because I think it is the people that need to push back.
Great. You want to? Yep.
My name's Irina Labaza. I'm just one of the worried. Well, I'm not medically trained. But along the way, going through things on YouTube and that, I understand the Russians have fasting hospitals. So you volunteer yourself, you're there for a month or two, and they medically starve you, in effect. And I just wondered if anyone on the panel was familiar with this approach. Oh, it's great that the Russians do it because they're good at starving people traditionally. But they are. I think there are 9 hospitals in Russia, and they cure a whole lot of things. Anyway, I'm just saying they're there. There must be certain studies we can look at there.
They're trying to starve the Ukrainians, aren't they? I think, so.
Anyway, so there's nobody on the panel that's familiar with these hospitals.
I know there's someone talking tomorrow on fasting. Is she here today? Angie? She might know.
Okay.
No?
Matt, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, Matt, with your 7-day fast and so on. I mean, to the lay person, I think, oh my God, you can't. How can you do a 7-day fast? I mean, how difficult or otherwise is to get these subjects to undergo regular 7-day fasts?
Yeah, it's not as difficult as you think. I think the key is doing it yourself, so you understand all the ins and outs. And I've taken it up to 14 days myself. So, and I do these things routinely, and I've taken it to a little of a ridiculous extreme to try and understand side effects and things. So the key is reversing psychology to help people understand that fasting is healthy and it's not damaging and it's not a bad thing. Just like with the keto diet, it's not that hard to get someone on a keto diet. Alzheimer's, whatever, is the most difficult condition I can think of. But it's about reversing psychology and helping them understand that this is healthy and that what everyone else does is not.
And Ron, if I can just follow on, I've got someone who's just doing it now. She's 79, type 2 diabetes, and she's just completed her second 5 or 6 day fast. And she actually said, do I really have to break it? And I said, well, it's up to you. But she said, I haven't felt this good in 20 years.
Right.
And she's actually just watched your videos, so thank you.
Yep.
Colin Indeen, dentist from South Australia. To Pran and perhaps the whole panel, I guess you're aware of the regenerative agriculture movement, and I'd have a plug for Charlie Massey's book, The Call of the Reed Warbler, and also Christine Jones, soil scientist, another Australian soil scientist. Really, so we're connecting the microbiome in the ruminant animals, rumen, and the microbiome of the soil, and now we're connecting all that to the metabolic disease. So hopefully you're aware of it and everybody else is aware of those researchers and their work.
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt about it that soil health dictates human health, not just from a microbiome perspective, but from a nutrient perspective as well. The microbiome within the soil accounts for a lot of the nutrients that are then brought forth in the soil. Regenerative agriculture, I think, is the future moving forward. The issue at the moment with regenerative agriculture, or the doubts around it, is the ability to scale to feed an entire planet. But I think those things will be ironed out with time. I think there is definitely a grassroots movement in Australia with regenerative agriculture. I think we've got to be careful. My home country of Sri Lanka tried a green method of farming where they eliminated things like glyphosate and pesticides, ended up with a 30% reduction in output, which resulted in massive starvation. So I think what we need to do is we need to transition from traditional methods of agriculture into regenerative methods. It needs to be done in a planned way. Crippling farmers and taxing farmers and making their lives difficult will be an absolute disaster. And again, the public needs to be deeply involved in this and understand what's going on.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to quickly answer the question to the Russian fasting clinics. So yes, they do exist. I don't know when it actually started. It was many, many decades ago. But there was this sort of neurological clinic somewhere in Russia, maybe Siberia. I can't remember where. But they had all these sort of really mentally sick people, and then one of the patients refused to eat. And they have been force feeding the people actually there, because you need to eat every day, 6 times a day, and food is very important, blah, blah. And one doctor was very brave and said, well, if they don't want to eat, just see what happens. And they miraculously improved significantly their neurological symptoms. And then they thought, okay, let's see what else is happening. And I've been fasting for 7 days, 10 days and more. And then they also noted that all their sort of other chronic diseases are getting better, or their pain conditions are getting better, and that's how it all grew. And they actually established these sort of fasting clinics in Russia. So yes, they don't starve them. So starvation starts when their last gram of fat is burned. Before that, it's just simply abstinence and fasting and going into a more efficient state of burning fuel. But yeah, so they do exist. But we have fasting clinics all over the world where people literally go to fast 40 days, 20 days, something like that. So yeah, that's the Russian fasting clinics.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for your wonderful presentations. I'm just here out of personal interest, but ironically in the break I got chatting with Chrissy, who I didn't know before today, and we had a similar query. So Dr. Lucy talked about behavioural medicine yesterday, and I was just curious, we're seeing all the wonderful results of keto and fasting and the stats that you're presenting. Matt and Ron started touch on this a little earlier, but what do you need to do to encourage patients? I mean, obviously, if they've got fairly significant illness and disease, that's very motivating. But what are the resources that you use, like, you know, for example, health coaches, or like how do you, because everyone is so locked into the normal way of life and being, and what else do you have in your repertoire? And I'll just let Chrissy add her question.
Yes, thank you. Excellent talks, by the way. I come from the GP perspective. I'm a GP in Adelaide. Feel very much like we're swimming against the tide. And how do you, I guess, pearls of wisdom of educating patients, because we're fighting these big corporations and that pyramid that people are still stuck on. What are your tips to get people motivated, basically?
All right, Ron, why don't you start?
Sure. Look, I think it depends on the patient, and someone like Andrew, who I presented on, you don't need many extra resources. And then there are some people who I think, you know, I do send them off to life coaches, and other people have seen, one of my patients has seen Lucy for one of her courses. So I think it just is so variable. You know, depends on the person. Some people will dive in and they go with it. It also depends on almost like the brainwashing that they've had, because, you know, when you start talking about this, they sort of think you're on another planet, and it, you know, you're sort of saying, you know, try and take it slowly and easily, and just explain that I'm not killing you and it's going to be okay. You know, because you're sort of taking away all those things that has been just so brainwashed in our society. So I just find it very variable, and some people you get great results, and some people just won't try it. It's just a bridge too far. That's been my experience.
Anyone else want to comment? Matt?
Yeah, I fully agree. It's about changing beliefs. You have to awaken this spark of enthusiasm. And once you do that, even a very sick patient can carry out 5-day fasts, time-restricted keto diet on their own. You just need to guide them in the first couple of months. Water, salt, the basic stuff that people often screw up. And again, it does help if you do these things yourself. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in medicine. We got patients on 15, 20 different medications. How often is the doctor taking that stuff? You know, like, so hypocrisy is a big thing, and that's eroded a lot of trust in medicine.
And I would follow on from that. I think just about everyone here, every medical person, would have done the N=1 experiment. I mean, certainly that was for me what changed it for me. I read lots of stuff, lots of research, and I thought, no, you know, this is, you know. And then I did the N=1, and it worked for me, and then became passionate.
Great. Yep.
Hi, Alok Gupta. I'm a nephrologist. My question is towards Matt about that 5 to 7 day fast. So how do you execute that fast? Do you put them as inpatients, bloods, watching their ketones? Do you allow some degree of calories, some sort of food during that fast?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's many different ways to do a fast, actually, in terms of duration and intensity. So we use a water fast plus tea and coffee. I allow 2 cups of tea and or coffee with no milk or additives. And they have to have a teaspoon of salt every day. And we just, you know, I give them a booklet that I've spent a few years making, and it just has these basic rules. If you follow these 5 rules, and you'll be fine. We measure the ketones every day. I think it doesn't matter so much what time of day you measure them, as long as it's the same time of day. I mean, obviously, most people have lower ketones in the morning and higher ketones in the evening, but for that person, as long as they're measured at the same time every day, and you give them a number to target, and as long as people, you know, you help iron out minor side effects, which usually relate to not taking enough water or not taking enough salt. And it's pretty easy, I guess. If you can take people who have had 3, 4, 5 meals a day, a high-carb diet for 60 years of their life, and start doing these different protocols, most of them can do it if you just know how to approach it. So that's all, yeah.
Yeah. Another question about, I've read through a lot of work done by Dr. Walter Longo. He's an Italian-American, and he has this fasting mimicking diet and a Prolon. Any comments about his the way he has planned his FMD?
Yeah, no, fasting mimicking diet is just a variation of a fasting protocol, and I think it's great. He's trying to ease the burden of the fast by allowing limited portions of food and so on. I'm more of a purist. I think if you're going to fast, you may as well just fast. But I don't, and embrace it. You got to, again, it's turning the psychology, turning the fast into something you anticipate. The last meal is critical to look forward to. You increase your dopamine release targeting that last meal. And it makes the fast so much more doable when you just change the psychology and help people understand what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. It's everything. People can do amazing things if they, what is it? The man with a why can do anyhow.
I agree with Matt. If I could just add on that, there was a gentleman by the name of Angus Barbari about 70 years ago, morbidly obese man who fasted for 360 days, just tea and coffee, and I think that was it. He reversed all his health issues. I think we've become obsessive about the ketones. I was listening to some of the discussion yesterday. I think fasting will kill you on some of these drugs, these oral hypoglycemics, which I agree have some level of efficacy, but those with kilograms and kilograms of fat, which we all have, especially in modern society, I think we should all be able to fast adequately as long as there aren't external pharmacological mediators inhibiting that process. Obviously, there's an element of willpower required. I'm not suggesting everyone fasts should discuss it with their clinicians, but certainly it's an effective tool. And I think Matt's talk was absolutely brilliant because mitochondrial health underpins everything, just at a quantum level of health. And fasting essentially teaches the mitochondria to burn fat, which has so much more of a quantum yield.
We've got Professor Schofield. Hang on. Look.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Matthew, I just wanted to comment on two things. First of all, on with that comment there, you've often described to me as cells as nothing more than bags to carry mitochondria. So I'll get you to comment on that. And the second thing, I'll get you to slip into some sleep medicine and talk about your experience with jet lag, because that has potential to help you.
No, that's a good point. So yeah, I'm changing my own beliefs as I do the work, and then the work, as you change your beliefs, you alter your work. It's really cool. I mean, what I learned when I graduated 10 years ago from Royal Melbourne as a neurologist, it's totally different now. So in terms of jet lag, yeah, I was in Portugal, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, and what I do is you time your last meal for when you'd normally eat it. For me, it's 1 meal a day. It tends to be around 5 p.m. And then you don't eat for 2, 3, 4 days. You just do a multi-day fast. Don't touch the airplane food. Just sleep, hydrate. You can bring a little salt if you want. And then most importantly, you time your next meal when you break the fast for when you would have eaten it in the new time zone. And I get zero jet lag. And I used to get jet lag a lot. I get no jet lag now when I do this. And it's great because I can ramp into something and feel great.
Terrific. Okay. Yes.
Hello, thank you very much for the informative session. So firstly, I will give you a quick context and then I will ask my question, which is for Dr. Pran. So basically, I'm a university lecturer and researcher in health promotion. I came to Australia 11 years ago, and I was so excited because I thought, oh my God, in Australia, in terms of health promotion, public health, prevention of diseases, I can do a lot, and I was so excited about it. So I started my PhD scholarship at Griffith University, and when I went to university, there was a very temporary building for School of Public Health. And then I was surprised that why the building is like this, because they gave the most of the budget to other schools. And then after a while, they suggested we don't need a School of Public Health. It needs to be a department and under a School of Medicine. And then they gave most of the budget and resources to medicine, and health promotion was a very small part of that. So basically, I was so disappointed, but then I thought, anyways, it doesn't matter. That's my mission in life, to focus on health promotion, which I believe in it, prevention of diseases, holistic approach to health and well-being, and all those things.
So my question is that how we can integrate health promotion to modern medicine to have a more integrated approach to health and well-being, and of course a more sustainable way to prevent diseases rather than focusing too much on medicine. Because if we help a lot of people, millions of people to improve their health and well-being, it's not really tangible. So, but if we do something about cancer, it will be in media and everything because the result is more tangible. So I really feel health promotion has been really underestimated and under-evaluated. So basically, I want to know what your recommendations are for different partners, consumers, healthcare professionals, academics, in order to improve awareness in terms of health promotion and also action. Thank you.
Right, Pran?
Yeah, look, great question. If I was to simplify it, I mean, as a medical doctor, I mean, I agree public health is important. It's critical. Hats off to the engineers and the plumbers that designed sanitation, many decades ago, hundreds of years ago, 1,000 some say. This improved public health, okay? And one of the biggest indicators for that was increasing lifespans of human beings. So that was one of the biggest moves made in public health. What we've got in public health at the moment, I think there's some useful things for sure, but there's also a lot of things creeping in which overstep the boundary between the interaction between a doctor and a patient. When I sit down with a patient, I'm not thinking public health, I'm thinking the patient. And if public health interferes with my ability to service or provide good advice to the patient, then I think we've got an issue. As low carbohydrate practitioners, or people that use it in part of their armoury, if you're low in carbohydrate, you're going to be higher in a macronutrient known as protein. It's a critical part of being human being, and it's a building block. The issue is that public health, particularly around red meat, as I mentioned in my talk, it provides a barrier for us to give that advice. Where I think we've got concerns is if that is implemented into law, that as practitioners, if we're advising patients to increase their intake of red meat, which is a nutritious source of food, that oversteps public health policy, and doctors are being reprimanded for that, I think we've got an issue, and I think we will see that in the future. So as I said before, medicine is fundamentally fracturing into two. There's no doubt about that. It's I don't think we'll see everyone in medicine convert to this health creation model, but I think we will see a split into two, and it'll take a long time for these sort of paradigm shifts to be implemented on a larger scale. May take decades.
Right, thanks. Right, a couple more questions. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the talks, have been amazing. I'm Rudy, a GP registrar in Western Australia. This is a question for Matt. Just have a question more about the metabolic interventions for cancer. Now, I noticed you referenced Thomas Seyfried as well, and that was awesome. I was wondering if you had any comments or opinions about glutamine inhibitors, as pulsed ones, which Dr. Seyfried comments on. But I noticed that it wasn't really done over here. But at the same time, I'm assuming that's probably because of the viability of having a clinical trial and trying to get that organized as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Cancer cells rely mostly on glucose, but they can use glutamine, as you know, as a source of fuel as well, which comes from amino acids. And so I'm a fan of combining these with medications. I think that the metabolic strategies are the A game, the medications are the B game, but I've got no problem with using medications that have a metabolic slant to them as well. I just think I favor the fasting, keto diet protocols and so on because they induce an orchestra, whereas medications tend to be like an instrument in the orchestra. But no, I've got no problem with using those. I just don't use them in my own patients.
Cool. And just to follow up as well, as I just had one other question was, how do you reconcile the use of dexamethasone in patients with GBMs and tumor swelling with their glucose changes?
How do I what with the dexamethasone?
Reconcile. So like when you've got patients who might have some tumor edema and they're on dexamethasone.
Yeah. I don't like dexamethasone, but so the reason he's asking that is dexamethasone cranks up your blood glucose level, and that may be adverse. It might be feeding the tumor. Look, a lot of the medications help us transiently and at a superficial level. Like I said, Dex is one of them. It makes the swelling go down, makes the person feel a bit better for a while, and then maybe dexamethasone is associated with worse cancer outcomes. So maybe it makes things worse in the long run. I asked the oncologists not to take it above 4, and then I try to be very respectful of my oncology colleagues and not interfere with the standard treatment. But that being said, I do nudge them and say, does this person really need 4? Maybe, can we go down to 3? Can we go down to 2? And quite frankly, we're over a year. The longest patient in this current trial is at 22 months now with GBM. She was supposed to be dead some time ago. A lot of them don't need Dex because I don't know, the fasting keto, as you know, they're anti-inflammatory. They might be reducing the edema accumulation. I don't know, but it's not a problem I'm actually encountering very much. It's a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, last question.
My name's Zach. I'm a GP based in Melbourne. And firstly, I want to start by thanking Pran for the excellent presentation. I believe that that's a very critical issue that healthcare is facing at the moment, and he's touched on a lot of those topics. So I've been a low-carb GP for about 4 to 5 years, and the best part of my life has been those 4 or 5 years because I've learned a lot, and that's why I'm here from Melbourne. However, I have a question which is probably going to be more medical legal than anything else, and I'm sorry to exclude Matt out of this, Matt, because this is a question that's directed towards healthcare practitioners in Australia. So I'm not sure if you guys know about the new bill that got passed in the Queensland Parliament. You know about that. So my question here is that while low carb is very effective, and I think I would use it for most of my patients, with the new bill that has been passed, and this is just for the public to know as well, that there was a bill that was passed in the Queensland Parliament by the Medical Board, the Australian Health Practitioners Regulation Authority, that will now flow into all the other states, that doctors and health practitioners will now not be able to question government guidelines hereafter. So that is a new regulation that just got passed. It's going to come out. The bill was presented in February. It's had its second hearing, and the third has gone through. So it's going to flow through in the next couple of weeks. So, which essentially means that there is only one way to approach a problem, and that is what the government has dictated or said. For example, the food pyramid. That is the only way to treat a problem. You cannot question it because it's the government guidelines, and the doctor will be disciplined if he moves in any other way. So my question now is, with the fantastic work that we have done over all these years to using low carb, where do we stand now in prescribing low carb to our patients? Because we can get reprimanded, we can get disciplined, we can get into this loop of APRA and lose our licenses because we can't question it anymore. So can I hear your viewpoint on that, Pran or Ron? Thank you.
Yeah, look, just from a personal perspective, I've lived in 3 socialist countries before moving to New Zealand and Australia, 2 in Africa and 1 in Sri Lanka. Technocratic governance is fundamentally applied in communism and socialist states. And this is what I've been trying to sort of almost warn against, that we are fundamentally heading into what is an autocracy. So at a political level, I think it's very difficult for Australia to appreciate this because we live in this wonderful democratic nation, but we're seeing a fundamental transition in that. This is a very concerning time for everyone, not just the doctors, but the members of the public as well. If you can't function within the system, I suppose we'll have to learn to function outside of it. How that looks, I'm not sure. And I think, we've excluded Matt, but really New Zealand's much the same. The policies that are being followed by the Labor government there are very similar, quite draconian, very scary. The attacks on the farmers in particular have been huge in New Zealand. So I think we face some major challenges moving forward. That's what I envision, and some very, very difficult and dark times ahead. But I've got faith in humanity, whether it occurs in our lifetime or our children's lifetime or grandchildren, whatever. I think we're fundamentally a free species, free nomadic species, and I think we'll emerge out of this. But it's going to require people to wake up and stand up against the tyranny of government, sadly.
Can I make a quick comment on that, Peter?
Yep.
Around the other side.
Sure.
Just on your question.
This is James Mukey, by the way.
Oh, hi, James.
Everyone, you'll hear straight after. You'll hear James straight after morning tea, which we're never going to get to at this rate. Come on, James.
Just on your comment about low carb and getting into trouble, it's now in our national diabetes strategy. You don't have to fear, at least for now.
Okay.
Right.
That's good.
Okay. Last one, Ron.
My comment is I think it might mean that we'll need to make lots of phone calls to Gary Fettke. So he might need to give out his number and...
Thanks, Ron. Well, look, on your behalf, let's thank the panellists for a fantastic session.